My granddad was Swedish, though he always described himself as Scandinavian. My grandmother, on the other hand, was full-blooded Cherokee and always wore a smile. Granddad played the role of mentor in my life, as my dad, who was in the military, was often away. My mom tragically passed away from cancer when I was 4, shortly after giving birth to a stillborn child, leaving my sister and me to be raised primarily by our grandparents. Granddad owned a farm in southeast Missouri, where he grew a variety of crops, including corn and sugarcane. If you were a farmer from the area, you'd know that he was also famous for distilling some of the finest whiskey and bourbon. His name was Jeb, short for Zebediah, and my grandmother was affectionately known as Happy, due to her ever-present smile. According to Granddad, he found Happy when she was just a young girl, around 12 or 13. She had wandered away from her village and got lost. Resourceful as she was, she managed to trap rabbits and cook them over an open fire while carrying the rabbit skins to use once she found her way home. When Granddad, at nearly 17, came across her, he did the right thing and escorted her back to her village. Her people had separated from the main Cherokee group during the Trail of Tears and settled in a remote area no one else wanted. The story goes that Happy was given to Jeb in exchange for 2 deer per year over 5 years. He honored his part of the deal, and Happy became his wife. They later had a church wedding when a church was built in the nearby community. They already had 2 children by then, but what mattered most was that they were happy together. Grandmother was a remarkable woman, and her love for Granddad knew no bounds. She would have given her life for him, or for my sister and me, without hesitation. One of the things she had learned from the white man's world was how to cook. She could turn almost anything into a delicious meal, and her cornbread was legendary throughout the area as the best around. My sister and I grew up in the country, knowing our dad was away in Vietnam toward the end of the war and later in Desert Storm. Wherever he was, it was never in southeast Missouri with us. We understood that he was still grieving the loss of our mother and was using the military to cope. My parents had married when they were both 17, with Mom 6 months pregnant with my sister. Dad had enlisted to support them, thinking he would be stationed at Fort Leonard Wood, not too far from the farm. The good part was that he finished basic training and was on leave when my sister was born, which led to a big celebration. When my sister was a week old, Dad had to leave for training at a fort in Texas, and when he returned months later, Mom became pregnant with me. Dad wasn't home when I was born, as he was stationed in Korea, where he spent almost 2 years. When he came back, they reunited, and soon after, Mom was pregnant again, but tragically, it was the pregnancy that cost her life. Dad was struggling, but he knew that my sister and I would be well cared for and raised to be good people by Granddad and Grandma. Southeast Missouri, where we lived, was known for producing hillbillies, or as the locals called themselves, scratchers. These folks could make a living from the land, using the 320 acres of low mountains and forests they had. Back in the 1920s, you could file for 160 acres of land for just a $12 fee, provided you built a house and worked the land. Many people filed for one plot of land, and their spouses would file for the adjoining plot. This is the land where Granddad and Grandma made their home and lived. We didn't have a lot of fields, but we grew enough corn and sugarcane to make ends meet. We even sold some sugar to neighbors. Granddad made his liquor in caves on the property, using spring water from the area, and took great care to avoid contaminating the creek with his distillation byproducts. He had a deep well where he dumped his leftovers, letting them filter into the earth. I'm sure the local water wells had a unique flavor. We'd fill milk cans with the aged liquor and transport it to Springfield, Branson, Fayetteville, and as far as Kansas City. In those days, no one questioned an old farmer in a beat-up pickup truck with cans of liquor. Selling it was never a problem, and the buyers always wanted more. It was always the same, and Granddad would tell them, "I'll bring more when it tastes the way it should." We had revenuers come to the farm fairly often to poke around all the buildings looking for cooking equipment, but they never found anything that would give away what we sold. We had cows that justified the milk, we sold some of the sugar we made, and fed a lot of corn to the hogs and cows. This was a working farm that had a big garden that we canned vegetables and fruit from every summer and fall. We had a lot of apple and pear trees that made great apple butter and some hard cider and vinegar that we kept for ourselves. Grandma loved that apple cider when it had a good kick to it. That smile would just get bigger. If you know anything about southeast Missouri, you know that those people are 100% rednecks. They'll give you the shirt off their backs, but they don't tolerate city folk, state lawmen, revenuers, or someone who steals from a neighbor. It was amazing how many people just turned up missing and were never heard from again. They disappeared, and even the car they were driving never surfaced. I don't know this to be a fact, but I bet they would find hundreds of cars that were lost over the years if they ever drained the Lake of the Ozarks. The local law was good because they didn't mess with anyone. They harassed the young men who drove too fast, but then they'd let life go on the way it had for several decades if they weren't causing any major trouble. Everyone knew where you could get a drink, and everyone knew where a man could find some comfort, as they called it. There were a couple houses on the outer edge of every small town or village that would have the light on the porch late at night. You could find comfort there if the light was on. No big deal, right? You could get some Saturday night comfort, as long as you were at church Sunday morning. One of the things I defy you to find deep in the heart of that redneck country is a hungry family. Neighbors provided the raw materials for a family to eat if they were having a problem. Young men would cut wood for heat and wood stoves. Those same young men would kill a couple of extra rabbits when they hunted and take the dressed game to those who were hungry. Chickens would find a way to get to those homes, as well as smoked meats that would show up on porches. Women would get together for blanket quilting and making clothing for the kids. These people took care of each other. I'm sure times are changing even for the folks in the mountains, but I'd bet they still take care of each other. Granddad was very strict about school. He said that he was glad to have gone to school through the 5th grade to learn to read and write. Grandma had never been to school, but she had learned to read and write. She knew a lot about geography and showed us kids the world through an old Encyclopedia Britannica. We would often spend a night with her reading about some far-off place. She would get the book with the world picture and point to where a place was. Anyway, Granddad made sure that we went to school and that our grades didn't slip. Sis was always fascinated by boys and young men as she grew up. Our grandparents would warn her off the bad ones and didn't harass her about the boys they thought were worthy of her. Sis was a good cook. She could darn a pair of socks with the best of them and could patch a pair of torn pants in a flash. She must have been good at some other things because she got married to one of the local farmer boys the week after graduating from high school. Her rented robe covered the rounded belly from her coming firstborn. I did morning and evening chores, as well as most of the field work, since I was the boy in the family. It was my responsibility to do any repairs on equipment, as well as our pickup and the family car. Our car was a very good running antique 1946 Chevrolet 4-door. The only times it was driven was to church on Sunday and the grocery store on Saturday. It was also my job to keep the leavings from the stills going down the deep well Gramps had dug. The well would almost fill up and you could smell it if you were within 20 to 30 feet if we had an exceptionally good year. Gramps would have me shoot a couple of varmints such as groundhogs and put them around the covered well so the dead animal smell would overwhelm anyone who walked nearby when that happened. That brings this tale around to hunting. Grandpa had a good double-barreled shotgun and a 30-30 lever-action rifle that did everything he needed to do. He also had a long-barreled Colt .45 revolver that he would go out and shoot targets with. He said that he hoped he would never need it. He also had a Colt 1911 automatic that he said was a great gun, but he wasn't a good shot with it. Grandpa took me to the Western Auto Store in town when I was 10. He bought me a used new-style .22 semi-automatic rifle that would shoot .22 shorts all the way to long rifle rounds. This rifle was supposed to be superior to others because you could shoot the inexpensive shorts without it jamming. You could buy what was called a brick of shorts, 500 rounds, for $5. Gramps paid $39 for the rifle with 2 bricks of shorts and a box, 50 rounds, of long rifle cartridges. I didn't get to use the rifle right away because Grandpa kept taking me out and teaching me where to shoot and when not to shoot. He emphasized how the round could carry for a mile and could hit someone or a farm animal. I was always supposed to be aware of where I was shooting. We went out with me carrying the unloaded rifle and he would point and say, rabbit, squirrel, and even deer to see what I would do. I would look to see where I was going to shoot as I would raise the rifle. I'd lower the gun if it was at a rock bluff. I wouldn't shoot if it was at an open area with no knowledge what was beyond. I'd raise the rifle and say, bang, if it was toward the ground. It was September before I was sent out with a rifle magazine full of .22 shorts. My goal was to bring back at least one squirrel or rabbit. My exciting 2 hours resulted in firing my new rifle 3 times and bringing a rabbit and 2 squirrels home. Grandpa took all the unfired shells from the rifle and counted them. Grandma took the clean game and began preparing it for supper. I had passed Grandpa's test. I didn't ask for anything special that Christmas because I felt like I had received the best gift for my birthday. Grandpa waited until everyone had opened the couple of presents of clothes that were given. I had made Grandma some kitchen spoons because I had noticed the ones she had were becoming nicked and looked cracked. I found some good oak and carved out 6 kitchen spoons that were every bit as nice as you could get in a store. Grandpa showed me how to smooth out the spoon and handle. I made Grandpa a belt from one of the deer hides I had tanned. My sister was always easy because she loved rabbit slippers. I would use a couple of rabbits and sew the hides into slippers. Grandpa disappeared and came out of the back bedroom with a used single-shot .410 shotgun. He told me that I had shown him I was ready to hunt for the family. He also told me, You're going to bring in your first deer this winter. It will take 2 deer to take us through spring when the steer we have will be ready to butcher. Grandma said, I'll make you a shirt from the deer hides like your grandpa wears all the time. I used the 30-30 to shoot my first deer the winter before my 11th birthday. It was very cold, and I knew that I had to get this over 200-pound deer home after I got over the excitement of the kill. I cleaned out what seemed like 30 pounds of guts and saved as much of the stomach and skin of the intestines as possible. There's no way I could carry over 100 pounds of deer, so I thought about it in the near 0-degree weather. I found a couple of small trees that I could break off and made a travois. I dragged that carcass over a mile back to the house. Gramps came out with some more knives when it was hung up to skin, and we made short work of skinning the deer and stretching the hide. He picked out a couple of pieces of meat to take inside and had me put everything else into the smokehouse. I was frozen by this time, but even my sister helped celebrate that I had brought home food for our table. I had a cup of coffee, and Grandpa poured me a finger of his good stuff and told me it would warm my insides. That stuff lit a fire all the way down. I'm still not sure whether it warmed me up or I didn't care whether or not I was still cold anymore. It didn't make a difference. I still had to do chores that night and to cut up a bunch of stove wood. I began trapping that winter. Grandpa bought a couple of dozen traps for $1 apiece at a farm auction and then taught me all the ways to stake them down and how to camouflage and bait them. He walked with me on a 2-mile circuit that included areas where we might catch an elusive mink or weasel. We might catch a fox because there were a lot of them in the area. I would leave the house at 4:30 in the morning and walk my trap line. I often had to use my .22 to kill what was in a trap. Getting the traps reset and the game skinned took a lot of time. I still had to do barn chores, but my sister would do the milking and clean up for me. I made almost $200 from raw skins I caught that winter. I gave Sis $60 because she helped me by doing a lot of my barn chores. I still had to study after supper at night, and it was often difficult to keep my eyes open. I would take my books into the kitchen and do my homework as Granddad would be reading an old newspaper and Grandma would be cutting up some of the game I had trapped. We ate any meat there was on the critter, even though it took a lot of her cooking skill to disguise the gamey flavor of the foxes and weasels. Deer and other mostly plant-eating critters tasted a lot better. I had over $2,000 saved by the time I was 15. I spent money on presents for birthdays and Christmas, and did as Granddad said to do and donated at least 1/10 to the church. I had bought a couple of steer calves at an auction and was raising them as meat for us, but Grandpa said I could get big bucks for them at the market. We argued over it until we agreed to sell one and eat the other in payment for any grain or hay I used. The animal we sold brought me a hell of a lot of money. I used the money to buy another 3 bull calves that would become food and money when they were grown. Granddad was teaching me how to be a farmer. Well, Sis got married to a farm boy without a farm and a dad who was happy to get rid of him. The boy, or I suppose a man now with a kid, tried working for different people in town, but the jobs just didn't last long. He was said to be a good worker, but he couldn't get onto a place like the grain elevator where he could work all year. Grandpa had them move into Sis' room, which was next to mine. The plan was for them to use those 2 rooms while I slept on the couch until we could build an extra room. Eventually, Grandpa agreed to install a propane tank. We moved the wood stove to the new summer kitchen where the pantry was and added a gas stove, along with a new gas heating system for the house. It was quite a mess. We had to tear up ceilings and floors to install the ducts. I didn't understand why we needed to put ducts everywhere when we had a fireplace in the living room and a wood stove that heated the entire house. We just added an extra blanket when it got cold. We added a new room for me and installed proper wiring for lights and outlets while we were renovating. Grandpa even went to the city and bought a 19-inch TV. We had to put up an antenna on the roof, but we could get signals from Cape Girardeau, Springfield, and Fayetteville, Arkansas. I had just graduated from high school and was looking for a paying job alongside working on the farm when we were notified that Dad had been killed the day before the ceasefire. A couple of men from Fort Leonard Wood came to the farm to inform us. I felt a deep loss, but he hadn't been home for almost 4 years at that point, and we had only just come to realize that our absent father wasn't ever coming back. Granddad got his shoebox full of important documents out and gave me a letter and 3 life insurance policies. The letter was from Dad, who had written it not that long ago. He had sent it to Granddad to give to me in case he was killed. I sat there staring at the envelope within the envelope that had "Gift to Bernie" written on the front. My eyes teared up knowing that I would never feel that man's arms hold me the way they did when he came home and before he left again. I wouldn't see the pain in his eyes for losing the person whom he loved as no other. Dear Bernie, you already know that I'm gone. I'm with your mom now, and please know that the 2 of us happily look down on you and your sister. I'm writing to you because you're the one who will take care of the family. I have the 3 life insurance policies that are to be used in a special way. First is to make sure that your sister, her husband, and baby are taken care of. Second, make sure your grandparents are taken care of for the rest of their lives. Third, I want you to go to a university and get a college degree to support your family for the rest of their lives. I know you are probably figuring on farming that godforsaken farm and imitating your grandfather. That's probably not a bad idea, but I want you to be more than that. I want my son to become someone people look up to. I'd bet you still don't have a girlfriend and aren't really hunting for one by the time you get this letter. You were always the practical kid, so I know that you're waiting for the right one to come along. Go to college. Your grades in school were always at the top of your class. I'm sure you'll figure out a way for someone to help your grandpa. I love you as I love your sister and my mom and dad. Son, I ask you to find a way to excel in your life with a little help from your dad. Your dad, Jack Daniel Beck. Grandpa was watching me read the letter and saw the big tears run down my cheeks. He reached across and patted my hand. You still have the love of a son for his father. He wasn't here with you as he could have been, but you still knew him as your dad. You never knew a mother other than your grandmother. I think she has savored raising you and your sister. The man had 2 glasses of his best with a couple of fingers in each, and as he picked up his glass, said, "To your father, my son, who died in the defense of his country." I picked up my glass, clinked it to his, and drank the dark killer liquid down. I looked at the letter again and handed it to Grandpa. He read it, folded it up, put it back in the envelope, and said, "You have your orders. Figure out how you're going to do as he told you." Grandpa got up from the table and left. Grandma was still in the kitchen and put a couple of cookies on a plate for me. She poured another few fingers of Grandpa's best in the glass and sat beside me. My grandmother leaned her head against my shoulder and said, "We will all miss your dad. He thought he was doing right to support his wife and the baby that was coming. Losing your mother was more than he could handle. It's time for you to take charge of your family now. We will support whatever decisions you make." The woman with a permanent smile picked up the glass she had poured for me and almost drained it, leaving a little less than a finger of the good stuff. My grandmother gave me a kiss and left me with the envelopes and life insurance policies. One was for $20,000, another for $50,000, and the last one was for $100,000. I looked at all the endorsements and saw that Dad had been paying for these by allotments from his military pay. It might take a while to get everything taken care of, but I considered where I was and what needed to be done. Sis's husband, Bryce, was becoming a decent hand on the farm, so I needed to show him what to do all year long. He loved the idea that Grandpa and I would show him how to do everything. The man was willing to learn, and we taught him something new every day. He understood that we would sell 2 and keep 1 for the family when the beef stock was ready to sell. We'd use the money to buy more calves and repeat the process. He could continue with the pigs we had or get rid of them, but then we wouldn't have the bacon, sausage, or hams. I think that he decided to keep the pigs. I taught Bryce to trap the same as I had been doing. He loved the idea of being able to trap and skin the animals that would bring money to the family. He was a solid moral family man who delighted in his son and was excited that his wife, my sis, was pregnant again. His dad wasn't a very nice person. He would come over and grunt a greeting, while Bryce's mother would be all over Sis and the baby. I took Sissy's man out when I found out that he had never fired a gun, and we practiced until I was confident that he wouldn't kill himself or someone else. He was able to bring a few handfuls of quail back for a good dinner. He began bringing rabbits and even a duck home. The guy was a sponge when it came to learning how to farm and hunt. I had written to Southeast Missouri State to see what it would take to get into school. I told them that I wanted to study law. They wrote back for me to apply at the University of Missouri in Columbia. That was farther away than I wanted to be. I knew that it would take more than the usual 4 years to get a law degree. This was going to require some thought. I went to town and talked to the local attorney, James Barker. He did all the legal work for people in the county. The county state's attorney was Jack Fornson, who was probably older than Grandpa. Both attorneys were excited that I wanted to become a lawyer. Jack said that his job would be open soon as he really needed to retire. James said that he always had enough business to keep another attorney busy. He said that he handled a lot of illegal alcohol transport cases that kept his bills paid. I wrote to the University of Missouri and was requested to come to Columbia for an interview. This trip required that I drive a decent vehicle, so I drove the '46 Chevy sedan. I brought my high school transcript and letters of recommendation from my teachers. I was dressed in my Sunday best with shine shoes and a fresh haircut. My enthusiasm kept people smiling, but I also knew they could see hayseed in me. The 2 people talking to me wanted to know what my family income was during the interview. I was stumped because I had helped Gramps do his taxes the last 3 years, but we didn't pay any taxes because we didn't make much money. I told the people that we didn't make enough money to pay taxes, but I know that we made almost $2,000 on sugar and beef the past year. The man asked, "How are you going to pay to go to school?" My dad had insurance policies that he left for me to go to school. He was killed in Iraq at the end of Desert Storm. He left a letter asking me to attend college, so here I am. The woman said, you are probably eligible for some state and federal help. Your SAT scores are very high and would entitle you to state scholarships if you had applied. Let us help you fill out your application to attend school after you complete a psychological test battery. I want to see where you stand with others within your age group. That took all afternoon. The questions were mostly stupid and asked the same thing in several different ways. I can't imagine how the answers to the questions were going to give anyone any insight to me and my ability to go to school. Another test was a general knowledge test that was probably meant for 5th grade kids. I did all the math and quickly answered the questions. I was now very hungry and asked about a cafe that might be nearby, so I could buy something to eat. The counselor looked up at me and said, I'm sorry, we didn't offer you a cafeteria pass. You'll have to wait until the evening meal is ready. I told her, you're not going to finish checking all those answers in an hour, so tell me where I can get something to eat. The woman was aggravated at me and said, there is a pizza place just outside the gate you just drove in. You can get a sandwich as well as pizza there. I didn't know whether I'd like pizza, so I walked to the little place and had a fat Italian beef sandwich. They didn't have milk, but they had iced tea. I had that and walked back to the university offices. The woman was still checking answers. She looked up at me and asked, have you taken these tests before? No, ma'am. I've not seen a bunch of questions like that before. They keep asking you the same thing, but in a different manner. I suppose it's to see if you're consistent with your answers. The woman looked at me for a long time and then finished reviewing the tests. She left and came back with the man who had been in the earlier interview. The man said, would you mind if I orally asked a battery of questions in a very fast manner? These questions are easy and you shouldn't have any problem. I'll ask you a couple of math questions, so here's a pad and pencil to do any figuring you might need to do. The two fired questions at me that were similar to those on the questionnaire I had answered. The math questions were all simple, and any of the kids I went to school with could have answered them. I asked, how do you do this with every potential student who asks for admittance? As soon as we were done, don't you have hundreds of people to interview? The woman said, you're among very few who are applying after they have left high school for more than a year. I can only guess that you have been a major help on the farm. How are those you're leaving going to handle you not being there? I gritted my teeth and said, my sister and her husband moved in with their baby. My sister's husband is a good guy and is working hard to take up the slack of what I always did. We all talked about it and think this will work. Dad wanted me to go to school, so here I am. The man said, we'll have to get confirmation, but we're recommending that you be given a full scholarship that includes housing and food through law school. You'll have to pass the LSAT, the law school admission test, but you should do fine if you do well in your undergraduate degree program. Do you have a plan for after you finish law school and take your bar exam? I want to go back home and practice law with the people I know. The state's attorney is going to retire, so that job might be open. I know I'll make a living practicing law there. The woman said, you have a very humble approach to life, Mr. Beck. I'm sure you'll succeed. I filled out a lot more papers and hand-wrote a short story in which they wanted me to describe why I wanted to become a lawyer and what I was willing to do to accomplish that goal. I was careful to spell everything correctly and to use the proper sentence structure and punctuation as I was writing. I handed it all to the woman who was sitting at a desk just outside the conference room. She told me that I would receive a formal letter of my acceptance within a week. She told me that I should be prepared to spend quite a bit of money for books, as the scholarship didn't cover that. She said that the university would help me find a position if I needed a part-time job to help with my everyday expenses. I walked out to the car with a big handful of papers. I was still hungry, but it was already near 5. I wanted to get on the road since it was 200 miles to home. I had left home at 5 this morning, so I was getting tired in addition to being hungry. I began going through Columbia and stopped at a McDonald's. I looked at their menu and decided on 3 of their hamburgers, an order of fries, and a large Coke. I figured that should last me, and it did. It took 4 hours to drive home, but it was worth it to go home and not stay at a hotel. Everyone was getting ready for bed, so we all agreed that I would tell them everything in the morning. I was sitting in the kitchen trying to unwind and eating a cookie when Granddad came out and poured me about 3 fingers of his best. He said that he got that way when he had to drive a long distance. He patted me on the back and left to go to bed. I heard my sis and her man doing what married folks do and wondered if it was as good when she was pregnant. The love was still there, and it might even be magnified. I envied the 2 of them for having found that love. I sipped the liquor thinking that I wanted that kind of relationship, but I really didn't know any girls I liked that much. There were some from my high school class that were unmarried, but most of them looked down on us country people. I knew I'd marry my sister if that had been available. I'd marry any one of my cousins, but they were all happily married farmers' wives. I wondered why I was so picky. Some of the younger girls at church would give me sweet smiles, but they were still in school and too young. There were just a couple of girls who weren't married who regularly went to church, but they didn't seem to want attention from guys. I was sure that I would meet a lot of new people when I went to college. The family sat at the table after chores and breakfast the next morning while I told about the day before. I showed everyone all the pieces of paper they gave me, and then the final brief letter that said that I would be given an invitation to attend their school at the state's expense. We talked about the costs of going to school, and Sis listed all the things I would need. The big expense was at the end, a vehicle. Granddad told me, "We'll go see that knob thief in town to see if he has something. We need to ask around first though in case someone has something they aren't using. You know how to keep a car running, so you can get an older model. You still have all your savings from trapping and beef money. I'm sure that you have enough to do what you need. Besides that, you have your dad's money that you might not need for school." Everyone already knew I was going to the University of Missouri in Columbia at church on Sunday. I think every person in the church came up to congratulate me after the final song and prayer. The word was out that I needed a car, and it was a little white-haired old lady who came up to me and said, "You know that my man passed a couple of months ago. I know you do because you were at the funeral. He had that fairly new truck that would be good transportation for you to go back and forth to school. I want you to have it, and you can do some things for me. Come over this afternoon and we'll talk about it." Granddad drove me over to Mrs. Snyder's place and went in with me. The woman was typical and offered us coffee, milk, or water, along with cookies that I'm sure she made special because I was coming. She sat us down and took hold of my hand. "You're so much like your father. My Judy and your father were sort of sweet on each other, and then that killer tornado came through here and she ran out in it. They found her body down in Arkansas. I think those two would have been a good couple. Your dad became sweet on your mom and they married, but times were bad then, and he went off to the service to be able to send money home. Your sister came along, then you, and finally the child that killed her. You were lucky to have your grandparents. I just love Happy to death. She helps everyone and has been sending you to those who need help all your life. Let me help you." The woman said, "You know that I have a few animals that need to go somewhere, so I want you to take them home and care for them. You might want to share the meat from the beef with me, but I don't eat much. I have chickens, and that means I always have extra eggs. You need to come by and get them. We'll eventually have enough chicken dinners to get rid of them. I'll need help getting sacks of grain from the barn to the chicken house meanwhile. There's going to be some things that will need fixing from time to time. You can do that too. All in all, I think this will be good for you and your family." I smiled at the woman and said, "You know that I'm going off to school and won't be here most of the time to do these things for you, Mrs. Snyder. Would it be good if Bryce, my sister's husband, came by to do them?" "Of course, Bernie. These are just some things that need doing. But you have to come to see me, and we'll have some of my man's sipping stuff when you're home for holidays. I'll always remember your father by looking at you." The beautiful, old white-haired lady pulled out a drawer in the kitchen and gave me the title to the truck along with all the papers that had come with it when it was purchased. She sat down with a piece of paper and wrote out that she was giving the truck to me for the price of $1. She was smiling as she said, "That'll get that greedy tax collector, Simon, all pissed off that he can't collect some extra tax money. Be sure to go buy insurance for the truck, and remember to come over and collect the animals so that I don't have to worry about feeding them." Grandpa wanted to go look at the stock, and we found a cow with a young calf and 2 steers that were past time to either butcher or ship. Mrs. Snyder said, "I'll miss my cow, but she needs to be gone. I can't go anywhere because I don't have anyone to come to milk her. I might come over in the morning or evening and milk her sometimes. It's sad to have a farm without any farm animals." I told this woman, "I'll milk her for you tonight and tomorrow morning, and we'll get the stock moved tomorrow. I'll make sure you get as much milk as you need. Just tell Bryce and he'll do what you want. I'll make sure that he visits with you often so that you can tell him of any chores he might need to do. I'll be by to see you and have some of your cookies when I'm home from school." I drove the fairly new truck home, noting it only had 12,000 miles. It didn't make sense for a farmer's truck, but he had a cap on it. It was obviously waterproof as there was no moisture in the bed. I was thinking of pulling the cap off, but it would be good to have a dry place to haul my clothes and anything else I needed to take to school. Bryce and I had a long talk about what he needed to do for Mrs. Snyder. He understood that she was giving us a lot of food, and the cow would be good for his kids. He said that he needed to find some pasteurizing equipment, but I sort of ignored that. That might be too much for us out in the boonies. Monday was busy because I needed to get the vehicle registered and insured. I actually had to insure it before registering it. The insurance wasn't that much since it was through the Farm Bureau. The state registration was almost as much, but it was a one-time fee with annual renewal. Bryce and I moved the stock from Mrs. Snyder's barnyard to ours. I used her tractor and manure spreader to clean her barn area where the stock had been and spread the manure in the fields. I spread some straw in the pens and the loafing shed where the animals normally stayed at night. I cleaned her chicken house and spread the chicken manure on the garden area. It would need plowing and disking again before planting, but some of the chores were done for her. The sweet lady always wanted to spend some extra time with me before I went home. We sat at her kitchen table and sipped some of her deceased husband's special liquor. I made her supper a couple of times so that I knew she would eat after drinking a glass of the special stuff. I brought her to the house to visit with Happy, Sis, and her babies. I was ready to begin school in the middle of the school year, January. I was to arrive and sign in at the dorm by 1 in the afternoon on the Saturday before the school semester began. I arrived on Thursday so that I could make sure my registration was correct and I had all the books I would need. I had everything I needed for my room and discovered that I shared a room with someone since I was a freshman or sophomore. I bought all the books listed on the papers I was given and used a campus map to check all the buildings and then made a route to the buildings in the order I would be going to them. I felt ready. The cafeteria wasn't bad, the food was decent, and you could get your fill. There were several cafeterias around campus, but the one closest to my dorm was a good one. I was reading a poli-sci text when my roommate showed up. He had been in school since August and felt he knew everything that was important. He lectured me the entire time. He brought his junk in and had it spread throughout the room. I asked him, "Can I help you get your personal stuff in your closet or under your bed?" He jumped up and stood over me as I sat on my bunk. "I'll put my shit wherever I want, and I don't want to hear anything else from you. Now get the hell out of here while I use this room the way I want." I stood and noted he was at least 4 inches taller than me and was probably 50 pounds heavier. I nicely said, "Just so we understand each other. We're roommates, and that means half of the room is yours and half of the room is mine. Stay on your half, and we'll be fine." The guy was stupid and rushed me with his arms spread like some idiot on the wrestling shows on TV. I gave him an uppercut that sent him back onto his bunk where he slid down and was out of it on the floor. Oops. I checked the guy and found he still had a pulse. Grabbing a hand towel, I ran to the bathroom, soaked it in cold water, and placed it on the back of his neck. I gently massaged his shoulders until he began to stir. He looked up at me and muttered, "Who hit me? It couldn't have been you. You're a small guy, and I'm sure I could knock you across the room. Help me up, and I'll prove it." I ignored the hostility and went back to my chair on my side of the table, the one we'd be using to study. "I don't even know your name yet, and I'm sure you don't know mine. Let's start on a better note. I'm Bernard Beck, but everyone calls me Bernie. Looks like your name's Scott, but I didn't catch your last name. Why don't we reset things? Who do you think you're talking to?" He snapped. "The only reason I'm stuck sharing a room is because I'm a freshman. Next year, I'll have a single, probably in one of the better dorms. I'm going to be this school's next starting quarterback, so I matter. You? Not so much. If I were you, I'd go live under a highway overpass until this semester ends." I looked at him evenly. "Sorry to disappoint you, but I'm not going anywhere. We're roommates for the semester. Talk to the floor resident if you want out. Until then, I've got reading to do, so either quiet down or take a walk." The guy went crazy. He went out into the hallway and yelled, "Anyone want to see a sacrifice to the gods of the Hicks? I'm about to destroy a Bernie Beck. Come one, come all, and watch the bloodbath." This wasn't good. The guy was really going to try to fight me. I know nothing about fighting, but I do know how to defend myself. Scott stood at the door and hollered at me, "Come out here and let me show you how to take a punch. I'm going to hurt you so bad that you won't go to class for a month." I stood and watched him as he was holding something in a hand behind his back. I said, "How about going out into the hallway so that I can have a clear shot at smacking you in the nose? I know you have something in your hand behind your back, and I only have my hands. You're at least 3 inches taller than I am, and you're sort of a fat slob who weighs over 50 pounds more than me." That did it. He swung around with what looked like a fire extinguisher. I ducked the swing and drove my fist into his gut. The stunned expression on his face was oddly satisfying. I wrenched the extinguisher from his hands and hurled it down the hallway. Scott dropped to his knees, throwing up, but he was recovering fast. He got back to his feet and growled, "I think you've done that to me twice. This time, you're dead." He charged with arms wide, but I ducked and pivoted, planting my foot on his backside and shoving him hard into the corner of the doorframe. That one definitely hurt. When he stood again, blood trickled from his forehead and nose. He screamed, "I'm going to kill you. You're dead." Just then, the floor counselor and 2 campus police officers arrived, pushing through the crowd that had gathered to watch. Scott yelled at them, "Arrest him." He wouldn't stand still while I tried to take him down. "Look at me. My nose is busted, and I've thrown up all over myself. Put him in jail. You know who I am, so you'd better do it." One of the campus officers turned to me and asked, "What started this?" I was in the room when Scott came in, spread his stuff all around the room, and told me to get my shit out of the way so he could put his anywhere he wanted to. I asked him to keep his personal stuff on his side of the room, and he went off on me. He became more violent until he was hollering for me to come out to the hallway so that he could teach me a lesson. He tried to hit me with the fire extinguisher that is probably still lying in the hall. I kept redirecting his rushes, and the last one sent him into the door jamb. The policeman looked at my hands and then began questioning the other dorm residents as to what they saw. They all said that I was trying to resolve the problem without physical violence. But Scott kept escalating the problem. The campus police had a problem. They had to separate us in some way and didn't know how. Scott was still hollering that he was going to kill me and that the police needed to let him get the job done. He said that they could hold me while he beat me to death. None of that sounded good to me. The police finally asked me if I would consent to staying in an off-campus room for the night. I didn't see a problem with that, so I went to get my coat and the book I was reading and followed the police out of the building. The two men took me to the Columbia City Police Department and put me in their holding cell. The problem was they took all my identification, my belt, my shoelaces, my coat, and my book. I told them that I wasn't the problem, but the victim of Scott, whoever he was. I was told to shut up and be quiet. No one knew what I was being held for Monday morning, so they wouldn't let me out until they found out why I was in the holding cell. I was missing my first classes at the university and becoming very ill. I was somehow forgotten for breakfast and then lunch. A police officer came to unlock the door about 2 in the afternoon and said I was free to go. I asked for my shoelaces, belt, book, coat, and my wallet with my identification. The officer said, "Get the hell out of here. You've caused enough trouble." I asked to see his supervisor. He pulled his billy club out and said, "I've told you to get out of here. You'll not be able to leave if you don't get." The gods were watching over me when a guy with a bunch of metal on his collar asked, "What's going on here? Tell me why you are threatening this man." The officer couldn't get anything out, so the man asked me, "Why are you here?" I told the guy the whole story. He acted embarrassed and said, "Come with me, and I'll see if I can find your personal effects." He reached over and tore the badge from the shirt of the guy who had come to let me out. He said, "Go see your sergeant to find out if you still have a job." The man took me to the front of the building and had officers running all over looking for my belt, shoelaces, book, coat, and wallet. Everything began showing up and my wallet finally came. I looked inside and said, there was a little over $150 in the wallet when they took it from me. That was money for my last lab books. I need that. The officer with the metal on his collars told the duty man at the front desk that he wanted every man on duty the night before to be in the conference room within 30 minutes. He looked at me and said, "So you're the guy who Scott, the infamous quarterback, is going to kill. I think you might need an escort to go back to your room. I'll take you there and also to the dean of the school so that you won't be charged with being absent. I'm thinking this is going to get worse, so stay with me." The man made some calls, and we went to the conference room where all the officers were lined up. I was asked to pick out the men who brought me in, and they were easy. I said their 2 names and pointed at them. I usually remember everything in detail, and it was easy to pick them out. They were asked about the money from my wallet, and one guy was acting guilty. I told the police officer in charge, "It's easy to identify my money because I always fold the corner of the bills to fit them in my wallet. The crease should still be visible." I had a $100 bill, 3 20s, a 5, and a 1. The 2 men were asked to show their wallets. One of them had 102 20s, all with the creased corners. He became hostile and said, "This country boy from the sticks doesn't mean anything. He messed with the new quarterback. Send him back to the country." The officer replied, "You still owe this man another 20, a 5, and a 1. How about staying in jail until you pay him back? You other officers, book him for theft and put him in the same cell Mr. Beck was in." Then he turned to me and said, "Come with me, Mr. Beck. Let's go see your room, and maybe your roommate." That officer had another officer drive us to the campus and straight to the dorm. I could smell the cafeteria and wished that I could go eat. We went to the 3rd floor and to my room. The door was torn off the jamb, and you could see that one side of the room was totally torn apart. All my books were torn apart, and my clothes were in shreds. My good Sunday suit was torn up, with my good shoes cut open with a knife. The small radio that I enjoyed was now smashed into tiny pieces. The officer told the other officer with us, "Go get your camera and come back to photograph this room. I'm calling the campus police to find out what they've done." Someone had pissed on my bed, and there was human shit spread all over my new sheets and pillow. The place made me ill, and I walked out. I was standing on the other side of the hall when Scott came in and began yelling at the officer. "It's about time someone came to see what kind of pig this Beck guy is. Look what he's done to my face. I have broken collarbone, a broken nose, and have lost a tooth. The a-hole sucker punched me. Just look at this pigsty." I walked to the doorway and said quietly, "Why would you tear up all my clothes and books? You destroyed over $400 worth of books. Why would you do that?" Scott spun around and snarled, "Now I'm going to kill you. The cops can watch while I cut you up for bait. Nobody does what you did to me." He reached into his back pocket and pulled out a large buck knife, flicking it open as he came at me. I still had a book in my hand and instinctively swatted the knife away. The officer nearby was so shocked he froze in place. Scott dove for the knife, but I stomped on his wrist, making him cry out in pain. That broke the officer's trance. He rushed in, pulled Scott's arms behind his back, and cuffed him. He looked at me and said, "Thank God you defended yourself." I was so surprised, I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Quietly, I replied, "Maybe I don't belong in school. My dad wanted me to go to college. He left life insurance money so I could come here. I want to be a lawyer back in my county, but maybe I'm not cut out for it." The officer replied, "I'm the chief of police here in Columbia, and I'll help however I can. This isn't the way anyone should start college. I think we can support you with a few things. And this punk lying on the floor might help too. His dad thinks he's worth something. Maybe enough to repay you for the damage." Scott started yelling again. "My dad'll have your badge. You're just a small-town cop. You better start polishing your resume. I'll be out this afternoon, and I'm still coming for that backwoods piece of trash." "Keep talking, Scott," the chief said. "Eventually the jury will believe every word." The dorm resident came in with a maintenance man. He saw Scott on the floor and me almost hiding in the corner. The resident said to the officer, "Bernie was only defending himself." The officer took him somewhere for the night to be safe, and then Scott went nuts and destroyed the room and all of Bernie's clothes and books. Everyone on the floor tried to stop and calm Scott, but he was out of his mind telling the world he was going to kill Bernie. I asked the resident, "Have any of my professors asked why I wasn't in class?" "A couple have called, but I told them there was a problem in the dorm and that you were trying to resolve it." I told the resident, "I need another room. I'll need to get some money to buy replacement books and some clothes. All I have is what I'm wearing now. I don't think there is anything worth salvaging in the room." The chief of police said, "Tell you what, let me call Scott's dad and see what he has to say. The kid's been in a couple of problems, but this is the worst. Let's see what he has to say. We can go to the Salvation Army store and get you some temporary clothes. They always have some decent stuff." The chief called Scott's dad from the residence room. I heard the chief describe what Scott had done, and he was going to jail on an attempted murder charge. Some of the lesser charges were going to be assault, extreme vandalism, and destruction of property. The next thing I heard was, "You can't buy your way out of this one. You might be able to salvage one hell of huge lawsuit if you were to replace the books your kid tore up and the clothes he cut up. He even slashed the shoes. The kid Scott attacked his country and doesn't know that he can have you for lunch, so cough up a couple of grand real quick so that the kid can get replacement books and clothes. You may ruin the whole deal if you do the lawyer thing and try to get him to sign off. The kid's country, but he isn't dumb." The next part was really funny. "I'm telling you, Scott, don't try to buy this kid with a new car or something off your lot. He's not the hick you prey on. Just give him a couple of grand so that he can buy some clothes and books. Your kid really screwed up this time. He may not be able to get back into school. Okay, get the cash to the station and I'll be there with the kid so that I can take him around to get some clothes." The chief turned to me and winked. He said, "If I know this guy, he's going to go overboard to get you off his boy. He tried to kill you in front of me, so he's still going to go to jail for attempted murder. Keep track of everything that was destroyed, because you should be repaid every penny it cost you to get back in class." The resident had another room next to his on the same floor for me. He told me, "This room is reserved for someone who isn't loud and who doesn't party all night. I won't keep you awake with moaning women, and I expect the same from you. Your room is a single, so you don't have to worry about a roomie. You also have your own bathroom and shower, but you have to keep it spick and span." The chief took me to the station where we waited for a half hour before the man we wanted to see came in. The senior Scott looked at me very hard and said, "You ain't that big. How did you get away from Scott when he wanted to beat you down?" I simply said, "I'm a farm boy and don't know any better than to defend myself." Scott kept trying to hurt me, and I kept trying to keep him away from me. He became angrier, and I was taken away. You probably know the rest. The man looked me up and down and at the wad of cash he had in his hand. He said, "I should probably have you sign something, but was told to just give this to you in an effort to resolve this problem. I hope this doesn't surface again." I wanted to tell him to send his kid to another school because I was going to graduate from here. I had this nagging feeling that saying nothing was saying everything every time I wanted to say something. The man left the chief's office, and the chief held his hand out for the money I had been given. He counted it out in some small stacks until he had all separated. It looked like more than what my clothes, books, and the few personal things destroyed were worth. I had been given $3,800. That was probably fair, but it was a lot of money. The chief asked, "Now, can I drive you around, or do you have transportation?" "I have a pickup that's in the student lot. It has a parking lot tag so that I can go and come as necessary. I'll go get some clothes, bedding, and my books if the bookstore is still open." The chief gave me a street map of the city and circled where the Salvation Army store was, where there was a Walmart, and a store he thought had the best deals on good men's clothes. I asked him, I'd like a ride to get my truck if you have an officer going toward the university. That was easily done. The Salvation Army store was near the student parking lot, so I went there first. There was a few pair of jeans that were my size, along with some shirts and sweaters. Definitely enough to get me started, and I wouldn't look bad. I couldn't find any shoes, but that would have been too easy. I found a very nice-looking expensive suit that the coat fit perfect, but the pants were just a little long. I could let them be that way, but alterations shouldn't be that tough to get. I still needed a dress belt, but didn't see any. I found 2 white shirts that were perfect, but one needed a couple of buttons. I also found a couple of ties, so my dress clothes category was taken care of. I was about to leave when I realized that I would need another heavy winter coat, so I searched through what they had and couldn't find anything. I saw a rack full of appliances while I was in that area. There was a radio on a bottom shelf that was the exact same model of the radio that had been destroyed. They wanted $1 for it, and I was doing really well on saving money for the stuff I had found. I had spent $30 for clothes and took them to my truck. Next was Walmart, where I found the sheet sets, pillow, and a couple of nice-looking blankets. I picked out towels, shaving stuff, deodorant, soap, clothes soap, some cleaning materials, a laundry basket, and loaded up on regular school supplies. I found a decent dress belt, and when I checked my wrist for the time and realized that my watch had gone away at the police station, I bought a $10 watch and grimaced as I had bought my last watch for $7. I picked out several pairs of socks, a pair of tennis shoes, and still couldn't find any dress shoes. I'd have to go to a mall and to Sears or Penny's. All I selected totaled over $200, but I wasn't dipping too deep into the cash yet. I went to the main bookstore next to the university with my list of books and lab notebooks. The only book I had salvaged was the political science text. The cashier was smiling at me when I was checking out using a push cart and asked, "You were just in here buying books 2 days ago. What happened to the ones you bought?" I didn't know how to answer, so I told her there was a scuffle in my room and a lot of my stuff was destroyed. I've just about replaced it all. I have a new room now, so I won't have to worry about a roommate getting into a scuffle. The girl squinted at me and asked, "That wasn't the problem in Davis dorm, where Scott McKinley tried to beat up a new guy, was it?" I sort of smiled and nodded. She said, "I'll bet my dad has already been around to try to pay off what Scott has done this time. Scott's always screwing up. I'm Scott's older sister, and I apologize for a family member's bad manners." I asked this girl, "Your dad is pretty well off, and your home must be here in Columbia. I have 2 questions. Why would you and Scott live in a dorm, and why are you working?" The girl laughed and said, "The folks split, and our mother is off and gone most of the time, so it's best for us to live in a dorm. Dad is running through a bunch of potential stepmothers for us. He gives Scott a lot of extra cash because he's the big football star. Dad says girls don't need a lot of spending money and thinks he shouldn't have to give me a lot more because he's paying for school. I don't mind working here. It does give me spending money, and I get to meet people. I was thinking that I could use a job to keep my cash right." The cashier stuck her hand out and said, "I'm Julia McKinley, and you're Bernard Beck according to your book order. What do people call you?" I grinned and said, "I'm Bernie to everyone who I spend time with." Julia said, "We have an opening for an afternoon and evening stock person. The pay is $1 over minimum wage, and they'll work with you on hours. This would be close to the dorm, and it would be a good way to meet people and have some extra cash. I'd like to apply. Julia, where do I get an application?" The girl said, "Wait right here." She locked her register and ran toward the back. She returned with an older woman who was one of those who kept her glasses on the tip of her nose and looked at you over them. It gave me a smile, so I made a good first impression. We chatted for a minute and then moved away from the register area. The lady had a pad and wrote down all the usual information of name, date of birth, what year in school I was in. She was concerned because I was taking what she said was what seemed a lot of hours for a first semester freshman. I told her that it was my idea to take extra classes and get caught up so I could graduate with what would be my normal class. She asked, "Do you really think you can make up 3 semesters? That's a lot of work, and you want to work part-time too?" "I'm going to try. I'm a good worker since I grew up on a farm. I'll work hard for you, and you know that I won't be a problem going out and partying because I have too much studying to do." The woman smiled and said, "Okay, I'll get your schedule, and we'll add hours for you to do some on-the-job training. We're open 9 to 9 daily, and 1 till 9 on Sunday. You need to wear clean regular clothes, and we'll give you a smock and name tag. Let's see how you like it." I noticed Julia is keeping an eye on you. She's a sweet girl and doesn't socialize much. You two could be friends. I pushed my cart toward the register and told Julia that I would probably see her when I come into work. I thanked her for introducing me to her boss. I could still get supper at the cafeteria according to my new watch, so I hustled to take everything up to my new room and then quickly walked to the cafeteria. I loaded up a tray, grabbed a couple of cartons of milk, and sat to eat. One of the guys from the dorm floor came over with a cup of coffee and sat with me. He was from St. Louis and thought that it was neat that I came from the true Ozarks. I told him that it's some real country down there. I was still almost overwhelmed by all the people and traffic in Columbia. He said the guys in the dorm were taking up a collection for me, as they could tell Scott had torn up everything I had. I told him, Scott's dad gave me the money to replace my clothes and books. I'll have to get some more clothes, but I'll be okay. Use the money they collected to have a floor party. We can order some sandwiches and sodas and all get together. The guy said, that's a great idea. We could even order pizza. We'll have to have a fight every once in a while so that we can take up a collection. I think the guys on the floor will take care of Scott the next time he gets out of hand. You did a number on him, and I don't think you swung at him. No one will mess with you now that they know you won't take any shit. I said, are there washers and dryers in the dorm? I have to wash some of my new and used clothes. I also have a suit that needs to be dry cleaned. Shoot, I forgot to get an iron and ironing board. I can do that tomorrow. The guy said, the laundry building is between our building and the dorm next door. There's a laundry building between each of the dorms. They are open 24 hours, but you have to get tokens from the resident. They have machines in the laundry buildings that take 5s and 10s, but it will short you sometimes. The place is really busy on Saturdays unless there's a football game. I thanked him and said that I needed to get back to the dorm. We walked back together, making me feel like I was being accepted by the others on the floor. The first thing I did was go next door to the resident's room and buy $20 worth of washer and dryer tokens. I asked about an iron and ironing board, and he said both were in the closet at the end of the hall. I could use them any time, but couldn't keep them in my room overnight. I loaded the laundry basket up with my sheet sets, along with my jeans and shirts, and went down the fire stairs on the outside of the building. The laundry building was right there just back a little from the dorm buildings. It took 5 washers to get everything going. I put that much into dryers and fed the tokens. One dryer didn't want to work, so I opened it and looked at the catch to see if it had a switch on it. It was stuck in one position, so I jimmied it loose and shut the door again. The thing started right up. I took out my class list to see where the professors I missed yesterday and today were going to be while I was waiting for the clothes to finish. I needed to go by and apologize for missing the first day of school. I hopefully wouldn't have to discuss the problem. I compared that to the schedule for tomorrow and made a plan. I thought all my professors would be available in their offices from 8 on, so I could make my 10 o'clock class after seeing everyone if I could make it through them all. I checked the campus map and decided that I could do this if I hustled. I had to go by the bookstore to get a work schedule during lunch, but I could still grab food and stuff it. Supper was going to be a problem because I wouldn't be able to get to the cafeteria if I was working. I'd figure it out because I needed to eat well if I was going to give my best to school. It took until almost 11 to get my clothes washed and ironed. I still had more to wash, but I would be fine for right now. I tried the radio and picked up the campus radio station and had it turned low on soft jazz. I was hoping to wake at 6 to eat breakfast and begin making my way around to the professors' offices before 8. I needed an alarm clock. I woke up at 5 after 6 to have a good outlook on what the day should be. I showered, shaved my few whiskers, brushed my teeth, and made sure that my hair was standing up the way it should. Most of the kids had long hair, but that would be a pain to wash and brush all the time. I liked a flat top that my sis was the best at cutting. I loaded the books for yesterday's and today's classes into my backpack, grabbed my coat, and left my room to go to the cafeteria. There were a few guys in gym clothes, or what they were referring to as workout clothes. I didn't understand working out, but I was sure I'd learn all the jargon as time passed. I finished breakfast and was camped at the first professor's door by 10 to 8. A man walked up to the door and used a key to unlock it and go in. He said, "I'm Jonathan Morgan. Are you waiting to see me?" "Yes, sir," I said as I followed him in. He turned lights on and put his backpack down on his desk and took out what looked like a calendar. "Can I see your student ID card?" The man looked at it and checked his calendar before handing it back to me. He said as he used his keyboard to make a few keystrokes, "Your predicament precedes you, Mr. Beck. You have all the professor's sympathy for being the butt of Scott McKinley's prima donna status. You were a discussion topic at last night's freshman advisory meeting. You're going to make some of what we want to do more difficult by taking a part-time job, but it fits you. Mrs. Harrison, the bookstore manager, called us last night and again this morning to let us know that you would be going to work there." I was stunned my problems had been discussed on such a wide basis. Dr. Morgan began, "Here's what I'm going to do with and for you. This class is supposed to be a way to teach students to study and to make priorities. Your application shows that you had to wait for the right time to apply and what you expect from us. I want you to read the class guide, which is an overpriced, very small book about college life. I'll give you the exam sheets for you to fill out and return to me. You can use my class time to study for other classes. I also have you for a poli-sci class that I really enjoy and will try to make interesting to everyone. You'll be there with me at 1 this afternoon. It should be an easy grade if you will read the course material and the book. Now, let's go see Grunder's son. He's such an old grouch, but he likes industrious students. We walked down the hallway and up a double flight of stairs. Dr. Morgan knocked on the door while turning the doorknob at the same time. An older gentleman was sitting at his desk that had small stacks of paper neatly arranged. He looked up and grimaced. "It figures it would be you." Jonathan laughed and said, "I've brought someone you'll enjoy helping." The man at the desk looked me up and down and asked, "Is he your new boyfriend or someone you're trying to seduce?" "Can it for a minute, you old perv. This is Bernie Beck, the student who had the run-in with the city police night before last and damaged poor Scott's facial features. He's come to apologize for missing your first class that you used to scare the bejesus out of kids. He's courteous and polite, as you can see, and comes to us with great recommendations from his past teachers." The man, Dr. Grunder's son, gave me a lopsided smile and said, "I should blindly pass you now for giving that kid a broken nose." "What do you want of me?" Jonathan said, "Do what I'm going to suggest for all his Monday classes, and let him work at his own pace, and see if you might get him through this semester as well as the second semester. Scale back to just this one if he isn't up to it. Bernie wants to catch up a year and a half, so he is at least level with the others who graduated high school with him." The man adjusted his glasses so that he could look over the frames at me and said, "I can do that, but I can't spend an inordinate amount of time teaching what his high school teachers didn't." The man took a deep breath and said, "Do this for me, kid. Use the book and complete the first 2 chapters, along with the problems they present. Bring that in by Friday, and we'll see what else we can do." I had already paged through the first few chapters and the questions, and they were all problems that were given to us during our grade school math classes down in the country. They called a few things by different names, but math is cut and dried. You're missing part of the puzzle if the problem doesn't solve. The professor said, "Now get out of here so that I can gloat over having a student in my classes who whipped up on the horrible Scott McKinley." Jonathan Morgan led me back downstairs and out the front, where we walked to the entrance of the next building. He said, "You're about to meet one of the sweetest professors on campus, Dr. Frida Campbell, the senior professor and chair of the Department of English. She's strict and demands a lot from her students, but you'll learn a lot of interesting information from her. You'll have at least 4 semesters of classes in her department." Jonathan knocked on a door with one of those glass panels you can't see through that had the name Frida Campbell, Ph.D. painted on it. A voice said, "Come." "Oh, it's so nice to see you this morning, John. I'm guessing this is the young man we discussed last evening. Bernard Beck, correct?" "Yes, ma'am." Jonathan said, "I briefly gave the group what I'd like to do with Bernie to see if he can handle the extraordinary heavy load he's registered for. What can you do with your course requirements to get him through at least the first semester classes?" Dr. Campbell picked up what looked to be part of the application I had made to the school and said, "Well, Mr. Beck, you're way ahead of the curve if you can write more like this in the future. No misspelling, your sentence structure and grammar are all correct, as is your punctuation. A note on the bottom here says that you did this in the registrar's office instead of taking it home to do. This is impressive." The woman stood, pulled a stack of papers from her credenza, and handed them to me. "Your high school obviously taught you well, so let's see how well. These are all the class assignments for this semester and the second semester that is being taught to those who began the school year last Labor Day. Please come and speak with me if you don't understand what I'm asking of you. I'll introduce you to one of my graduate staff associate professors who can also assist you. I'm interested in seeing how you perform without supervision." Just thinking of 2 semesters of assignments had me sweating, but this would definitely help me achieve my goal of making up the time I lost. The stately woman asked, "Can you type?" "Yes, ma'am. I've had experience on manual and electric typewriters, and a computer keyboard most recently. I use the computers at our library in town." "Good, good. Get a laptop and printer if you can afford one. I think you can get one for a reasonable price at Walmart. You'll need some software, but the most important will be a word processor. Put that on your priority list to purchase using the income from your new job at the bookstore. Mrs. Harrison seems excited that you will be coming to work there. Good luck, Bernie, and bring me a steady stream of assignments." Jonathan and I walked back to his office where he said to me, "Your last class for Monday would be your Intro to Poli-Sci, my other class with you. Read the book cover to cover. Attend class when you can, and I will not register a cut if you're studying or working. I think you can expect that from all your professors. The freshman year is often all the professors seeing what you learned in the 12 years before you came to us. Go to the bookstore to get your work schedule. Come to see me next Monday or Tuesday early like this morning. I'll register as your academic advisor." I walked out with enough work to keep me busy night and day for a couple of months. The weather had been mild so far this winter, but the rest of January and February are always the killer months. Going into the dorm during the late morning is different, as it's very quiet. I arranged my books on the small study table and put my suit in my backpack to take to the cleaners. The bookstore was just outside the gate where student parking was, so I went there first. Mrs. Harrison was at a front register and smiled at me as I walked in. "Good morning, Mr. Beck. I've heard your professors are going to work with you to try to get you caught up for the year. You might be pushing it to try and catch up a year and a half in one semester. Here's your work schedule. So show up at 4 this afternoon and you'll work until 9. You have an admirer who has insisted that I try to schedule you during the same hours she has. I'm speaking of Julia, as you can guess. I think she's been impressed that you're courteous and soft-spoken. I have a question, Mrs. Harrison. I'm a growing boy and need a lot of food. When do your people who work that 4 to 9 shift eat dinner? Good question. The bookstore provides some hoagies that should satisfy your hunger. I always have more than enough, so you can eat 2 or 3 of them. I'll let 2 at a time go to the cafeteria if we're real slow. Thank you, ma'am. I was going to see if the cafeteria could make something up that I would bring. This is better because I won't take long to eat and be back working. With my schedule in hand, I told the manager, I need to run a couple of errands real quick before lunch and attend my poli-sci lecture. Dr. Morgan said I didn't have to attend, but I want to experience one of his lectures. I'll see you before 4. That meeting made me smile as I headed to the dry cleaners next door. I asked the clerk if they did alterations, and she pointed to an Oriental woman sitting at a sewing machine. I need the pants on this suit shortened about 1 inch to 1.5 inches. The woman said, if you can step over to the curtained dressing room and put the pants with your shoes on, the seamstress will mark your pants for you. I put the pants on, and the Oriental lady came over to slide the pants up and down on my waist. She said, we take up some here. You new student, so we'll probably gain weight. You still grow, so you need have material at bottom to let out later. I marked for you to look good. The lady did her thing, and I changed back into my jeans that I had obviously pressed the night before. The lady who had measured me passed her hand over the crease and said, you good man to press pants to look good. You will have lots of ladies who like man to look neat. The clerk made a comment as I was putting my coat on. I have a coat that was brought in last year and has never been picked up. I'll bet the coat would fit you perfectly. Do you want to try it on? I smiled and said, yes, if it's in better shape than what I have. I need a new coat, but haven't found one that I like yet. The lady brought the coat out, and I tried the very nice leather coat with a heavy zip outlining on. This thing would have cost a fortune at the fancy department store it came from. The clerk said, fits perfectly. Pay for the cleaning, and it's yours. How do you thank someone who doesn't know you but makes your life better? I profusely thanked her and told the clerk that I would do a chore for them when I came to pick up the suit. She said, you can do a favor for me right now. Use this pole and release those dresses stuck at the roller stop. Someone put the price tag too high and it caught on the stop. I lifted the dresses down where she could relocate the price tags and then put them back. She used her conveyor buttons to move the dresses forward and backward. She was so happy that she hugged me. My goodness, I received a hug from a woman, and I didn't even know her name. That's pretty heady stuff. I left the cleaners walking on air, proud of myself for having helped someone. The woman came running out the door with the leather coat, hollering that I had forgotten it. She knew that she had flustered me and kissed my cheek while showing me the ring finger on her left hand to tell me that she was taken. I drove to the mall that wasn't that far and parked near the Sears entrance. They usually have their shoe department just on the other side of outdoor equipment and tools. It was where it should be, and I went through the shoes and found a pair that looked nice, while not flashy. I also bought a pair of loafers that I would wear with jeans. I bought a can of black shoe polish and a brush set when I was paying for the 2 pair of shoes so that I would be ahead of the game shining the shoes. I had to fill up with gas and waited until I got to the Walmart store. Their gas prices are always a few cents less than other stations. I was able to park fairly close to the door because it was still early in the day. I locked the truck and went in to look for a laptop. I really searched through the laptops they had and finally decided on one that made me feel like it might last a while. They had a deal on the laptop, an inkjet printer with a scanner copier fax, and Microsoft Home and Student Office for just under $1,000. This thing will hopefully last more than a year. I bought 2 Pumpshia memory cards to go with it so that I could back up what was on the hard drive. They had another type of memory they called a memory stick, but they didn't have any of them. I bought a small pack of CDs that you could only write on once. There was a new style coming that you could rewrite on the CD, but the CD inventory hadn't caught up with the equipment. There were too many distractions in the store, so I pushed my cart to the front to pay and headed back to the dorm with my purchases. I mentally calculated that I was now down to a little over $2,500 of the $3,800 that Scott McKinley Sr. had given me. I resisted the urge to get distracted by the new items, so I organized everything on my desk and took the boxes out to the dumpster. My study table and computer desk looked ready. I hoped that I was. Lunch was good with some beef hash that had carrots and potatoes in it. I had that and some green beans, along with an apple before going to my political science introduction lecture. The lecture hall was like a movie theater, with the speaker lower than the audience. I was sitting low in the middle, And Jonathan Morgan smiled and nodded at me as I sat with my notebook ready to take notes. The textbook was open to the area he should be covering, but he said that he used the textbook for a guide and enjoyed giving us the side notes of the history of political science. He said everything he would lecture on would be in the text, but he hoped that he could enthuse us more by giving us some insights rather than just dull facts. The hour rocketed by, and you knew that the professor enjoyed the subject. My 2 o'clock class was a requirement. Student financial management was taught by a stiff, shriveled-up-looking woman who must be drowning in people who can't count or manage a checkbook. There's no way I should be forced to take a class like this. I waited for the class to clear and went to stand in line to speak to her. I've been handling my family's finances since I was 12, Miss Chickering, when it was my turn to be in front of her. I'm not saying that your class has no value, but do you really have to teach 18, 19, and 20-year-olds how to balance a checkbook? All these people are in college, upper education. They need to know how to negotiate and how to look for ways to save money. The lady's left eyebrow rose into a distinct arch as she looked at her student roster. You might be bored with this class, Mr. Beck, but it's very important to most of the students. I have a packet of tests for you to complete for me. I've heard other professors are doing this for you as well. Please attend lectures if you have a question, and you can ask me then. Miss Chickering handed me a dozen sheets of paper, smiled, and closed her briefcase in preparation for leaving. She said, "Come, I'm on my way to the bookstore. I spend a few hours there daily as a part-time job. You can get an early start on learning what to do." She mentioned Jonathan Morgan several times on the way to the bookstore. She finally admitted that she was excited that he had asked her out for dinner this evening. She sounded like a high school girl. I told her that I really enjoyed his class, as well as his assistance getting my classes in line. Mrs. Harrison had Miss Chickering take over the front and led me to the back. She handed me a smock, showed me a locker to put my backpack in, and took me to a bench where signs were made. She showed me how to make a name tag and said I would be doing a lot of them because students didn't stick to a job very long most of the time. I made the name tag, pinned it on the smock, and then was shown how to make the signs. You put spelled words and the price on the layout, put ink on the roller, imprinted the piece of cardboard, and hung the completed sign up on a clothesline to dry. She kept checking her watch and finally said, "Okay, let's get you punched in to start your day. You were early and able to donate some time to the bookstore, but you'll now be earning that whopping hourly wage. There are other benefits. I'm sure they will be appreciated." I was sent back to finish the long list of signs. This was obviously a planned activity as I finished just about the time a bunch of hoagies were ready to consume. Julia came up to me, far too close to me, and said, "Come eat with me. There are sodas and iced tea." Julia and I talked about our classes, our day, and told me that we both had Friday evening off. She said, "You know, we could do something together Friday night if you want. The student union always has something going on, or we can drive somewhere and have dinner together. I really want to spend some time with you." Julia could tell that she made me nervous, so I said, "I've never been on a date. There was always something to do on the farm. I would go with a bunch of friends to the county fair for rides on the Midway and eating all the crazy food there, but there were a lot of us all together. Most of those girls are already married now. I just never did pick one." Julia was laughing. "That's funny. The way you say pick one is as if the men were always in charge and you selected a mate and they came running. I know that's not politically correct, but that's the way it is down in the country. Male-female chemistry is helped along by tradition and custom. Most of the kids in high school had already made that selection by the time we graduated. A few were going off to college, but most of them had already selected a life mate. I didn't because I've always felt there were more to choose from that I hadn't met, and I wanted to meet as many people as I could before I said I wouldn't look at another female and get excited." Julia smiled so sweetly and asked, "Do you get excited looking at me?" I laughed and said, "Now that's being forward, Julia. Of course, I get excited seeing you and will think of you later. How could I resist your piercing eyes and very voluptuous body? Yep, you do a number on me, Julia. We better go back to work or I'll be on a knee proposing." We were both laughing as Julia is not voluptuous at all, but very slim. She had the decency to continue laughing and said, "That could be interesting." I spent the rest of the evening putting books on shelves. It looked like I was going to be constantly condensing groups of books through several stacks of shelves and bringing a new book to feature. All this required a sign. The first several weeks were fun, and I asked Julia on a Thursday if she wanted to go out to eat Friday evening. She blushed and said, I have to attend a family dinner at my grandmother's. I'd love to have you accompany me, but Dad might get a little upset. I'll approach him tonight to see what he thinks. Scott Jr. is still in jail and hasn't been given bail yet. You won't have to tell anyone about the problem you had if Dad agrees to not bring it up." We were having supper, and I said, "I didn't even think of the ramifications of us going out. We shouldn't be doing this, and definitely not in front of your family." Flames came from Julia's eyes as she said, I will do it when I have opportunity if I want to introduce my special friend to my grandmother. I'll not hide my feelings and will show off someone who I'm proud to know. I don't think I'll give Dad a choice. We're going to Gamma's for Friday dinner. She's going to love you. I hope you're right, Julia. What will be the appropriate apparel to wear for something like that? She thought about it for a few minutes and said, wear a suit and tie this time. We'll go in jeans next time. I studied all day Friday and turned in a stack of completed homework for each of my classes. I think I surprised them all when I turned in a couple of months of tests and questionnaires for each class. I completed a book report, complete with reference cards for English, with a synopsis of the subject for a future assignment to be written for that same class. The assignment requested her approval for the subject summary. I almost felt guilty about the math exams. They were so simple that I had to go back over each problem to ensure I hadn't overlooked anything. I turned in the entire semester's work. Dr. Grunderson tossed the papers on his desk and said, couldn't you have given me these a little at a time? What will you do for the rest of the semester now? Easy. I'll work on next semester's material, I replied. I enjoy math, but I had to learn some new terminology for concepts I already knew by other names. I really liked calculus in high school, especially when I learned how to apply it to farming problems. The grumpy professor looked at me and said, that's what people don't do anymore. They don't apply simple math to their everyday life. You just said you used your knowledge for farming, and I can understand how you would do that. You learned it and applied it. I hope I can teach my students to do the same. He shook his head and added, get out of here. I need to prepare for my next lecture. I spent 4 to 5 solid hours in the morning studying, had lunch, and then worked another 3 hours on assignments. I attended several lectures to clarify certain terms or concepts for my assignments. Working at the bookstore was supposed to be only 20 hours a week, but the manager wasn't rushing to hire more people since the store was running smoothly. Julia and I were having dinner in the back of the store when I brought up, we're both working a lot more than 20 hours a week. We're working 16 hours on weekends and 18 hours during the week. We're barely keeping up with our studies, and this isn't what we signed up for. We went on a Friday night date and almost fell asleep while saying goodnight. How are we supposed to be wild and crazy college kids like this? Julia started laughing as she said, you know, I was thinking the same thing. We've barely had time for anything, and I even bought a big box of things we might need, but we haven't had the chance to do much. I sighed. We just need to find a balance. Everything's been so hectic with work and school that it's hard to catch our breath. We shared a quiet moment, knowing we had more to look forward to once we found a way to relax and enjoy things more. For glasses appeared with amber liquid in them. Julia leaned over to me and said, be careful with that stuff. Grandmother has it brought up to her from somewhere down where you live. I wondered if it could be some of Granddad's best. It was Inquisition time as Aunt Jill and Grandmother really went to work on finding out about my family, where I grew up, about my deceased parents, and my grandparents. It took Grandmother a little bit to understand that my grandmother really was named Happy. I told her that Happy had the warmest smile she would ever see. My grandfather was someone special because he had taken my sister and me in and raised us. I proudly said, I have been taught to be a good person by 2 good people. Then it was time to question Julia about our relationship. Grandmother asked, you two haven't known each other that long. Are you rushing your relationship? Julia smiled at her grandmother and said, now don't tell me about rushing things. How many times have you told me the story of how you and grandfather met at a church dance and were at the altar within 2 weeks? We're not heading to the altar, but we're learning about each other. Julia's Aunt Jill had been fairly quiet, but then rather bluntly asked, have you two found out if you're compatible in bed? I about fell off the couch. Grandmother didn't help when she said, that's an important topic. That's why your grandfather and I were married so fast. We tried each other out and liked it. Julia was bright red and answered, we've barely kissed. We haven't had time to go out on dates much. We spend all our spare time studying and working at the bookstore. Grandmother became alarmed and said, that's wrong. Kids need some playtime. You two need to quit that job or get the hours reduced. How are you two ever going to have the time to just talk to each other, much less do some hayloft discovery? I offered my excuse. I wasn't able to start school right out of high school, so I'm a year and a half behind the other kids my age. I want to make up those hours and be at the same level as the others from my area who are here. I think there are 2 from my graduating class who go to school here. I want to catch up. I went on with a comment about Julia's situation. Julia's dad doesn't give her an allowance or offer money, and says that she should earn what she spends. He feels he supplies the tuition, books, housing, and cafeteria, so she should be able to take care of herself. Granny was getting steamed. Jill huffed and puffed a little. Jill said, our folks did all that for us kids and still gave us plenty of spending money. Your dad's car dealership is selling a record number of cars and trucks, and I'm sure that he's not giving them away. I know he probably has to pay alimony to your mom, but she has money of her own. That skinflint should be as good as or better than our mom and dad. My goodness, just hearing how he's shortchanging you makes me mad. I wonder if he's had to pay off a bunch of girls Scott Jr. might have been fooling with. I hear Scotty's been in some new kind of trouble every time I turn around. I heard he was kicked out of school for fighting and may not be able to get back in this time. Him being the BMOC as the football quarterback of the future isn't going to help him if he doesn't have a school to go to. Grandmother said, I didn't hear about this one. I'll have to call someone to find out the details. Julia said, don't bother. Gamma, Bernie knows about it firsthand. Scott and Bernie were assigned as roommates, and Scott got mad for being assigned a roommate and attacked Bernie. The police came and tricked Bernie into going back to the police station where they locked him in a holding cell and robbed him. Meanwhile, Scotty destroyed all of Bernie's clothes, personal stuff, and books. Scott tried to attack Bernie in front of the chief of police when Bernie was let out of jail. Jill asked, how bad did he hurt you? He's a hell of a lot bigger than you are. Julia said, I heard all about it. Bernie just defended himself and kept pushing Scott away. Scott has a broken clavicle, a broken nose, and lost a tooth. Bernie kept pushing Scott away from him and avoiding his rushes. He didn't ever hit Scott, just pushed him. Bernie didn't even get a bruise. Grandmother was squinting and said, I wonder why that wasn't on the TV news or in the newspaper. Scott Sr. must be running around keeping everything quiet. Now listen here, Bernie. Scott has plenty of money, so make him give you some of it. I'm not talking about replacing your stuff, but money enough for you to enjoy life while you're learning. What are you going to school to become? I smiled and told the woman, I want to be a lawyer and practice law back home. There is only one lawyer in town, and he's talking about retiring. Our county state's attorney probably should retire too, and has mentioned it to me, so there is a built-in practice for me down there. I always wanted to learn the law. Grandmother leaned back in her chair and put her forearm over her forehead. I was getting worried, but she sat up and asked, Julia, you didn't tell him, did you? Julia smiled and said, no, I wanted you to tell him. Mrs. McKinley was smiling at me when she said, my George went to law school in Boston. We'll look up all his stuff one of these days. He came back here to practice law and was unbelievably successful. He started out in good shape because his parents had money. My parents were also very well off. Well, George won a couple of enormous court cases that are still paying his estate. We made sure our only son, Scott Sr.'s dad, was spoiled and helped him go into the car business. He was super successful with the dealership and raised Scott Sr. to be a good automobile man. Scott Jr. wants to do that too, but is going or was going to wait until after his professional football career. He might be in jail for a while if he tried to kill you in front of the police chief. The little white-haired woman said, so you see, I find it sweet that my great-granddaughter, who shares my name, has met a man who wants to be a lawyer. You're not mouthy enough to be a lawyer. You better learn to be more vocal. Jill said, you have your grandparents' gift that I know you haven't touched, Julia. You would be welcome to it if you wanted to use some of my cash. Your dad could put you on the books at the dealership, and you could make a commercial a month and probably make more than what you do at the bookstore. Julia said, but that's when Bernie and I get to see each other and chat a little. We've been eating breakfast together lately, but Bernie needs the job. I looked at Julia and said, I actually don't. I had a lot saved up, and it's in the bank up here. I should have enough to get through law school without working, but I enjoy the work and the time I have with Julia. Grandmother said, I want you to get a young lawyer and sue Scott because Scott Jr. might still be a part of Scott Sr.'s family responsibility. You can sue Scott Jr. and he would have to use his trust fund money that could pay you. You don't have to go crazy, but you could get some money pretty fast that would carry you through school. Julia can do the same with her trusts. This family isn't paupers. We all have money so Julia can do as she pleases if she wants to be a sugar mama. Jill said, you know, you could be one of those cougars and hire him to be your pool boy, grandmother. The older woman laughed and said, I don't have a pool, so I'd have to use him for something else. Do I have to watch out to make sure you don't steal my guy before he's even officially mine? Julia was laughing as she said this. I said to Julia, I'm having a great time, but I have to get up early tomorrow to have breakfast and do some studying before work. I'd sure like my breakfast and study to be with my work partner. We don't go in until noon, so we can get some studying in. This headstrong possible girlfriend said, you could invite me to stay over with you. Your dorm allows that, the same as mine. It's just not convenient to use the bathroom. Julia's hand went to her face, and it turned red. You have the room next to the resident, so you have your own bathroom, you dog, you. I'll just pack a bag, and we'll break the box of toys open. Grandmother said, oh boy, my little Julia is making some adult plans. Do Jill and I need to give you the talk, or do you two think you can figure out how to do it? I was blushing now, but Julia grabbed my hand and softly said to me, you'll have to invite me, or I'd think I was being too pushy. Jill began laughing. You can be as pushy as you want when you have your guy in your sights. I'm so excited for you, Julia. and I just know that you're going to enjoy finding out about each other. I gave you that Kama Sutra for modern girls as your welcome to college life. Make sure you pack that to go visit. Now I need to go home and ravage my guy. I'll probably have to wake him up." We all stood up at the same time. Jill hugged Julia, then turned to me and gave me a hug. She said, "George has been falling asleep earlier lately if she doesn't use you up." Julia and grandmother hugged, and the white-haired lady then pulled my coat sleeve so that I would approach her. She gave me a sweet hug and a kiss on the cheek. She smiled at me while still holding onto my arm. I might have to consider that pool boy thing. We all laughed while we went toward the front door. Her man handed me Julia's coat and let me help her into it. He then held my good leather dress coat up for me to slide on. I helped Julia into my pickup truck and thought that it had probably looked strange in the driveway. Jill's car was a Chevrolet Impala, which wasn't a show-off car. She might have a fancier car, but they drove the Impala here tonight. I let the truck run a few minutes to let the oil circulate. This cold weather can be hard on an engine. This was only a 6-cylinder, and I didn't want to abuse it. We drove to the student parking lot, and I walked Julia to her dorm. I told her, "How about we meet for breakfast about 7 or 8? You decide. Let's sleep in a while and meet at 8 in the morning. I'll meet you at the cafeteria, or you can come by to walk me there. I'll bring my books, and we can study there or go back to your or my dorm." "Sounds good." I gathered this woman into my arms and kissed her better than we had kissed before. Our energy was racing out of control by the time the kiss ended. Julia held me close and told me, "I hope you felt all the things happening to me and us during that kiss. It's enough to scare us." I softly said, "You best go in or we're going to want more than we should have right now. We still have some getting to know each other before I begin proposing." We kissed once more, and I watched as she went to the open elevator and disappeared. The floor residence door had a "Do Not Disturb" sign hung on it. I needed one of those. I wondered if there might be one on the closet shelf. There was one in the other room. I let myself in and was quiet as I undressed and hung my clothes up. I checked the high shelf, and there was the plastic sign that could be hung on the doorknob. We would need that if Julia does come. I turned the radio on to my nightly jazz encounter and lay in bed thinking about how crazy it is for me to be so enthusiastic about a girl. Sure, I had crushes on one girl or another as I grew up, but the closest I came to being sweet on a girl was when I sat in the same bus seat with a local girl. We were pretty relaxed with each other and chatted for a couple of months before she began sitting with the other girls. I went back to sitting with the guys or my sister. I owed my family a letter, and it nagged at me long enough that I got up and got a piece of printer paper out and wrote a letter of my progress. I told them about being able to get a nice suit at the Salvation Army store and that I was working part-time at the campus bookstore. I finished the letter telling about meeting a girl that was very sweet. I included I had gone to a dinner party at her great-grandmother's home. I told the family that I missed them and would try to schedule a weekend off from the bookstore so that I could come see them. I'd bet Sis's 2 kids were getting really big. I gave it a love, Bernie, folded the paper, and put it in an envelope. I wrote out the address and return address, and put pants and shoes on, rode the elevator down, bought a stamp from the machine, and dropped the envelope in the box. That was a chore that needed to be done. I undressed again and lay in bed thinking about Julia. Was it too soon for us to be thinking about sex? To be thinking about some kind of permanent relationship? This boy-girl stuff is confusing. My motor was winding down, and I was almost gone. What was that? I heard more female noises, and then a steady banging from something. I almost fell out of bed. That was the resident doing the bumpity-bump. The bed was rickety enough to rock into the wall, and the female voice was the recipient of the resident's efforts. The wails became louder as the bumps became firmer. This babe could make some noise. I heard what was almost a scream and a very loud groan, and then the banging noise stopped. Well, that was fun. I lay still trying to hear what they were saying, but they were talking softly, and my jazz station covered the rest. I heard the toilet flush, and then the bed groaning as they must have gone back to bed. There was a scraping sound, so he must have pulled the bed away from the wall so that he wouldn't be banging on it next time. I looked at my watch and saw that it was almost midnight. That did it. I went right to sleep. I woke up with a start and looked at my watch. I didn't oversleep. It was only 6:30. I didn't have to get up right then, but something dinged in my head, and I sat up. I needed to change the sheets and pillowcase, and maybe get another pillow. I should probably get another sheet set, and some more towels. I really needed an alarm clock, so I should run to Walmart. The shower had me wide awake and ready for the day. I took my cash from my hiding place and separated $100. I changed my mind and took $200 out. I shouldn't need that much, but maybe. I put my old coat on and was out to my truck all in less than 20 minutes. I didn't let the truck warm up that much, but I didn't rev the engine and slowly drove to Walmart. I went back to appliances and found a good alarm clock. Next was housewares, where I pulled another sheet set, another pillow, 2 extra pillowcases, 2 bigger bath towels, and some washcloths. All the sewing stuff was next to that. I went to the display that had a variety of everything one would need. I picked out this wheel that would open over some buttons. The thing was filled with all sizes of shirt buttons and all the colors of the rainbow. On that same display was a kit that contained everything someone would need to sew a button on or sew up a small area that might have pulled apart. It even had a thimble. I was pushing the cart toward the registers when I saw some women's long, fluffy robes that looked warm and great for lounging around in. I hate sizes, but these weren't too bad. I chose a medium. I went to the pharmacy area to be on the safe side and found the condoms. I chose a big box and also found the KY jelly. I had heard all the complaints about first times and how difficult it was to properly slide in. I thought that I would be embarrassed when the lady checked me out, but she just scanned the items, took my money, and I was out of there. I did forget some shampoo, but Julia would have to direct me on that. I pulled the old sheets off and took a laundry basket down to the laundromat with the sheets, pillowcases, and my towels. Everything fit in one of the big washers. I didn't wash the robe because I didn't think I would need to. I took a chance because it was Saturday morning and ran back up to my room to put fresh sheets on, and I put 2 fresh towels and 2 washcloths out. I ran back downstairs, put the washed items into a dryer, fed some tokens in, and ran back upstairs. I straightened out the closet and dusted the room. The bathroom wasn't messy, and there were no water spots on the tub walls. I looked around the room, and it looked good. I went down to the laundry building and waited for the clothes dryer to be done. I quickly had everything out and folded, and carried it upstairs. The gold color blankets looked as nice as a spread, but the 2 side-by-side pillows looked a little funny. I put the condoms and KY in the drawer of the bedside table. Looking around, I thought I was ready for an intimate visitor. I felt my face, and it wasn't even a little prickly, so I didn't need to shave again. I grabbed my new math book and went to Julia's dorm next door. My watch showed that it was just before 8. The elevator door opened, and the woman of my life stepped out. She almost ran to me, and we hugged. She said, "I'm hungry, and we have a lot to talk about." We were sitting at a table with a pile of pancakes, coffee, milk, and a couple of scrambled eggs. You could get seconds, but I like to get everything at once. Both of us ate ravenously, making me wonder why we would be so hungry after the great food we had last night. We sat back with a warmed-up cup of coffee when we finished. Julia said, "I was nuts last night thinking about everything with us and about school. You know that I took that job for the money and for the opportunity to meet people, and maybe a guy. I did all that, and then thought of how silly it was for me to be sitting on a real fortune in my trust from my grandparents, my great-grandmother, and the trust my mom insisted Dad set up for Scott and me individually. I don't have any idea how much all that is, and I don't care, because it's there for some future happening and not to be frivolous with. Scott's running through his money pretty fast, and you're going to help him spend some more. You need to calculate what you will need through law school, and then figure what the bookstore would pay you while you work 20 hours a week. There will be a number that will be what you will want to get from Scott. Remember that you have to give the attorney you hire about a third, so add that in. I'm sure that Scott will elect to settle without going to court. I'm sure Dad will tell him to do that, and will help him if he needs it." She looked me in the eye and said, "You obviously have a few dollars that you've put away, and you received some from Dad to replace your clothes and books. I think we should give our notice at the bookstore and use the time we were working to study and get further ahead. Get as many credit hours as possible while you have all these department heads working with you. It's not like you're paying for the hours since you're on a full scholarship. With you being successful with the program and our association, I might talk them into letting me do the same, and the 2 of us can really rocket ahead. We might be overdoing it, but if anything we were doing that with a part-time job." I warmed our coffee up again and sat back down. "Okay, so the plan is to give 2 weeks' notice today, hire an attorney for me, you negotiate with the department heads to work ahead, and then we'll see how we can plan on spending more free time with each other." Julia said, "I thought about us last night. I have been pushing you, but I want to know about all those intimate things, and you're the one I want to learn them with. We're both lost sheep between the sheets. We need spring break to spend some continuous time together to see how well we still like each other after spending that time together. That's over a month from now. You know that we can get that much farther ahead if we go to summer school. I'm thinking we can do that as well." I looked up at Julia. I feel guilty about leaving the bookstore. I've only worked there just over a month. I was able to get the discount on all my second semester books, which amounted to over $100. I think Mrs. Harrison comes in on Saturday morning and is gone by 10. Let's go over there now to see if she's there and talk to her. We both slung our backpacks over our shoulders and headed toward the bookstore. It was just opening, and Mrs. Harrison was checking the registers. She looked up and asked, "Did you 2 do anything special on your night off?" Julia answered for us and said, "We went to dinner at my grandmother's. I was able to introduce Bernie to some of my family." Mrs. Harrison said, "Well, you do come from an old family here in Columbia. Why are you 2 in so early?" I spoke this time and said, "We need to talk." Both of us may need to give our notice. Can we use your office or the break room? She said, let's use the break room. I put coffee on and it should be done. Julia and I didn't want any coffee, but we sat with Mrs. Harrison. I began, I'm still very appreciative that you gave me the job. It was to give me a few dollars spending money and help me meet people. I'm trying to do an accelerated program that will get me ahead about a year and a half, as you know. I have a full scholarship, so I'm not shortchanging myself on tuition. You were pretty specific that the most I would work would be about 20 hours a week when you hired me. We're both working 34 hours a week with 4 days of 4.5 hours and the 2 weekend days. That's 14 additional hours, plus travel time, that we could use studying. Julia continued on and said, my grandmother convinced me to use some of my trust for extra money as I need it. I don't do anything extravagant or frivolous, but I might go somewhere for spring break this year. I really think I should leave, but you may be able to convince Bernie to stay. The boss directly asked me, do you have trusts or cash stashed? No, ma'am. I do have some savings, and I'll probably get some extra money from a lawsuit that's coming up. I need even less than Julia to live on, so I actually have what I need through law school. Our farm doesn't make any big money, but they know how to save what they do bring in. My dad's life insurance policies will carry me through the way he planned it. The lady said, I didn't realize that I was putting that much of a burden on you until Grunderson and Morgan asked me if I was trying to kill you for Scott McKinley Jr. I was going to speak to you, and didn't realize that I had Julia working parallel with you. You two make such a sweet couple, and I hope you make it together. I see hope in our country's future when I see young people like you. Can we do this? Both of you work this weekend and Monday for me. I'll get some of the applicants who have piled up to come in for interviews and find out what hours they can and want to work. Your last day will be Monday, Julia, and we'll have to see about Bernie. I can tell you, though, that I will not ask him to work the weekend again after working 4 nights. Julia and I looked at each other, and I said, try to find my replacement. I need the time to study, sleep, and to talk to someone who might be my future life partner. Mrs. Harrison said, I'll go start calling applicants in. There are a few who worked in the bookstore before and left because of scheduling conflicts. I'll start with them. They might be able to give me answers today. Julia asked me what I wanted to do, and I said, it's almost 10, so let's stay here and study. We'd waste too much time going back to the dorms and then coming back here. We can use the 2 hours more productively by staying right here. Mrs. Harrison had paused at the door to see what we were going to do, and I think we surprised her that we didn't want to waste any time to travel back and forth to the dorms. I saw her smile as she headed to her office. I was able to get through the first half of the trigonometry class text. It would take the second reading and the end of chapter tests before I could attack the problem sheets Grunderson had created. I didn't think I would have any problem with this semester. I put my book back in my backpack and went to the bathroom at close to noon. Julia slowly stood and said, I didn't get enough sleep last night, and we'll have to suck up some caffeine to get going. We, or at least I, have to quit worrying about so much. You'll make it work out. I told Julia when she came back from the bathroom. Let's go outside, no coats, and jog around the building. That will wake both of us up. We're making the right decision to get out of this. Julia went to the front where she managed the registers, as well as questions from customers. I reset an entire section to accommodate a book for a new class. We would have a high demand on the book because it's the first semester it'll be used. Mrs. Harrison came from her office about 6 o'clock and introduced us to 4 girls who used to work in the bookstore. We chatted for a few minutes before the 4 left. Julia and I were told, you don't have to come in tomorrow or from now on. Those 4 all wanted and needed their jobs back. Both of you listen to me. Call me if you ever want or need to come back for part-time employment. I'll find room for you. You two have been the best employees I've ever had. I'm going to have the assistant manager close at 7. There hasn't been a customer in the store since 5 or 5:30. That made everyone happy, and we hugged all the folks and walked back to our dorms at 7. Julia asked, can you wait for me to shower before I come over? The only thing I don't have is your shampoo. Bring your shampoo and clothes for church tomorrow. I gave her a quick hug and then laughed before saying, come to my web, said the spider to the fly. Really? We're going to church together? Which one? Where? What denomination? I smiled at Julia and honestly answered, I have no idea. Julia was impressed that my room was neatly organized and clean. She sat on the bed and patted the twin pillows. She looked at me and said, this is very nice, Bernie. Let's take a shower so that we're both clean to inspect all the parts we don't know much about. I've seen boys before, and I know that you've seen girls, but I'll bet you're like me and haven't really had the opportunity to look at what everything looks like up close. Let's do it together so that we can touch each other. This is almost too exciting. I remembered the sign on the shelf and hung it on the doorknob to avoid any interruptions. Julia was already heading toward the bathtub, and I followed, setting my things aside. We stepped into the shower together, letting the cold water wake us up before it warmed. Wrapped in each other's arms, We shared a quiet moment. Julia looked up and smiled. I'll call grandmother and find out what church she goes to. I haven't been in years. She'd love to come with us. Her words surprised me, but they felt natural. You're something special, Bernie, she added softly. It feels like we've known each other forever. Oddly enough, I felt the same way. As the steam rose around us, I handed her a washcloth and gently helped her rinse off the soap. We laughed and exchanged a few small kisses, the warmth between us growing more emotional than physical. The comfort of simply being close, of caring for one another, filled the room. After drying off, I handed Julia a fluffy robe and got dressed. She used the hallway phone to call her grandmother. Hi, Gamma. No, we haven't done anything crazy, she said, blushing. We just took a shower together. We want to go to church with you tomorrow. Bernie's driving. She hung up and smiled. She's happy. She'll meet us at 9:30. The dorm was quiet as we returned to the room. I made sure the Do Not Disturb sign was hanging properly, and we dimmed the lights to settle down. Julia wrapped herself in the blanket beside me. We lay close, exchanging quiet stories from childhood, about siblings who used to sneak into our beds during storms or nightmares, looking for comfort. Julia yawned. Let's just hold each other tonight, she whispered. It feels good to be safe like this. We drifted off to sleep wrapped in a quiet understanding and something that felt like the early stirrings of love. Breakfast was special that morning. The kitchen had prepared French toast from thick slices of bread, soaked in a sweet egg mixture and lightly crisped. Served with melted butter and just a touch of maple syrup, they were perfect. I added a couple of over-easy eggs, some juice, milk, and coffee. As we sat finishing our coffee, Julia said, I was thinking, maybe we should just stay in student housing. With food like this and a comfortable space, why waste money on an off-campus apartment we might not even like as much? You've got your room. We have hot water, good heat, and a quiet place to study. She gave me a playful look. I'll still come by and help you fall asleep. Am I being too pushy again? I almost said it last night, and now I want to shout it in this half-full cafeteria. I laughed and replied, I get what you mean. Let's see how we feel after a few weeks of being around each other so much. Just thinking about the future has my stomach doing flips. You're my first real relationship, Julia, so you kind of have to be my first love. But we're still young, and committing this early is a big deal. Still, we've grown comfortable with each other really quickly. Julia added, this isn't just some casual thing, it's real. We're going to church with my grandmother today. She probably already suspects something's up. And if my luck holds, Aunt Jill will be there too, with her usual nosy questions. Be ready. Those two have been asking me when I'd find someone special for years. And now, you've become that someone. I sat quietly, watching Julia. She had a kind of natural charm, soft flowing hair, kind eyes, and a smile that always hinted at mischief. She carried herself with quiet confidence, and I found myself wanting to learn more about her with every passing moment. We were waiting on the curb when her grandmother pulled up. We climbed into the car, glad to escape the cold February wind. Julia hugged my arm and smiled at her grandmother, who said, we'll swing by and pick up Jill. She usually comes to church with me. As soon as Jill got in, she turned to Julia and gave her a knowing look. I can tell something's different. You've got that look. Grandmother McKinley rolled her eyes. Let's just get to church first, shall we? Jill grinned and leaned over to me. I better hear she's happy. That's all I care about. It was hard not to laugh at Jill's dramatic flair. The church service was warm and welcoming. I was introduced to dozens of people, many of whom I hoped would reintroduce themselves so I could learn all their names. Afterward, we headed to what turned out to be one of the finest brunch spots in town. Julia's grandmother, clearly well known, was treated like a VIP. We were seated on a raised section of the dining room, and the staff were attentive and kind. I helped the ladies through the buffet, where we were offered a variety of dishes, seafood, chicken, beef, and more. I started with prime rib and eggs, then returned for more, including a lobster tail. The others watched with amused expressions as I loaded up my plate, clearly surprised at my appetite. Julia leaned over and whispered with a smile, now we're getting to the best part, the reason we all come here. I know I'm going to love it, and I think you will too. We were brought a tray of various cakes with a stack of ice cream in the middle covered with chocolate syrup and crushed nuts. There was some different kinds of syrup mixed in, along with tiny flecks of peppermint leaves to enhance all the flavors. It was excellent. Grandmother had her man drive us back to her home, and we were seated in the sitting room at first. A maid brought out small glasses and a large earthen jug and began pouring generous portions into each. The senior Mrs. McKinley picked her glass up and motioned for us to do the same. She said, I've always regretted that Thomas didn't stay with me long, but he did give me my children. We weren't supposed to be mates, but it couldn't be helped. We were the closest that cousins could be, and we remained that way. Have a sip for my lost lover, knowing I will honor him for all my days. I sipped the delicious corn liquor that was mixed and fermented with other grains the same as Granddad did. I watched as Julia sipped and closed her eyes to enjoy the blast on her taste buds. Jill did the same, and Grandmother sipped, smiled, and then closed her eyes in a smile. Jill said, "Grandmother said that you two had both resigned from your bookstore job. What are you going to do with all that spare time?" Julia looked up with her impish grin and said, "We're planning on experimenting with all the various positions in the book you gave me. We've only tried a couple, so we have many days and nights to try the rest." Jill was shocked, but Grandmother burst out laughing. "Oh, Julia, you are often so much more than your mother could and can handle. She's out traveling the world shopping for someone to take Scott's place. You make me proud to be your grandparent." Jill said, "You're the perfect person to carry on the traditions and quirks of our family. Come, read the words of your aunts, mothers, grandmothers, and great-grandmothers. Our family has always been full of strong women who loved and protected their men, and I know you will do the same. God bless both of you." Grandmother held on to Julia as she went through a moment of missing her mother and grandparents. I felt this was a special moment, so I leaned back and smiled at Jill. She almost leapt across the space, sitting on my lap and hugging me, her head resting on my shoulder. I simply held her, letting her find comfort until Julia and Mrs. McKinley were ready to speak. Julia raised an eyebrow and teased, "Are you trying to see if my man will fall for your charm, Jill? You've always been my favorite aunt, but now you want to share him?" Jill burst into laughter and almost toppled off my lap. She kissed me, then playfully launched herself at Julia, where the two embraced, laughing together until Grandmother gave a sharp whistle to get their attention. "George and James used to love watching you two go at it," she said with a smirk. "But this is not the time or place for that. Take your man home and talk to us tomorrow, Julia." We slipped into our heavy coats and made our way to the car that would take us back to the dorm. Once we were in my room, Julia said, "I need to get ready for school tomorrow, so we should say goodnight. Thank you for being a part of my family today. I haven't seen my grandmother so happy in years. I hope we can visit your family with the same warmth and closeness. We will love. My people are simple and ready to enjoy knowing others our family enjoys. I hope it's soon." It was still early, so I changed sheets and tossed the towels into the laundry basket, along with the white shirt I had worn. I set it aside because I could do it while I studied in the morning. I had made up a list of assignments for my first and second semesters and entered them into an Excel spreadsheet so that I could check off what weeks were complete in each course. It wasn't spring break yet, and I was over halfway through my second semester classes. I should have a direction by when I wanted to begin my third semester. I needed to choose my classes, so I would have a specific course of study toward a degree that would assist me getting into law school. A high score on the LSAT would be good, but an overall good GPA would be equally as good. I thought about this a while until I finally decided to go see Jonathan Morgan in the morning. Dear listeners, next part of this story will be released soon. Please share your thoughts in the comments section below and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.